The Republican Zone is brought to you by Drew Murray.
Good afternoon. You're watching The Republican Zone on Usula Media. I am your host, Drew Murray, and I have two guests on today. Normally I only have one, but I have two. I have Akeiff Staples and Brent Johnstone from Fathers Read 365. So, guys, thank you for coming on today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Yes. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. So my show is called The Republican Zone, but and oftentimes I do have political guests, more often than not, but this isn't political at all. This is just, you guys reached out to me, I guess a few months ago, just to kind of say, hey, we want to tell you our story, probably more just in case I get on the council. I will say when I get on council.
Yes.
But, so yeah, I thought it was an awesome story, and before I even called you guys, I did some research. I read up on you guys, and it is an incredible story. But first, why don't one of you just say, hey, tell us what Fathers Read 365 is about. What do you guys do?
So Fathers Read 365 is a father initiative that looks to engage fathers and all family members in early literacy with their children, but not just their children, with the whole community, right? Knowing the importance of early literacy and how it impacts the whole community. So we do this by going into daycares, performing live readings, inviting families in to give them like an active reading training, show them how they can make literacy fun, and also to show them we get to share our message around the importance of literacy. Something that we really took on in the last few years, especially around the time of the pandemic, was book distribution. And that's kind of where we have hung our hat, is book distribution, early literacy book distribution. So that's zero. Really, we focus on that pre-K space, but we can work anywhere in between 0 to 8.
Nice. So what made you say, and first of all, you guys met in college.
Yep.
Yes.
Temple University Owls. I am also an Owl. I went to grad school, though.
There you go. Owls are everywhere.
If I was big enough and a good enough football player out of high school, maybe I would have played at Temple, but I was not good enough. So I was D3. You guys are D1. You could probably even tell by looking at you and sitting next to
you
me.
look bigger than us now.
Right, I know. Well, maybe in my stomach, that is true. So you guys met in college.
Yes.
But what made you kind of say, hey, this? You obviously saw a need. What made you say, I'm gonna start Fathers Read 365?
Well, in 2017, Brent and I reconnected. After college, we had a few social work positions out in the professional world, and we were looking to connect and get a football/educational program started. Football, education, we were doing the social work, so we thought it was a good fit. Didn't really transpire into anything, so we went our separate ways. So between that was 2011, by that time, for those 6 years, we had created fatherhood initiatives ourselves, unbeknownst to us. And somebody said, who we also went to Temple with, said, you guys should reconnect. You really should. You're doing similar things. And we connected. The synergy was there, and we just started creating programs. And Fathers Read 365 was one of them. And, we hit the ground running in March.
5 programs when we started?
Yeah, we started with 5 programs, but Fathers Read 365 had the most traction. It had the most response from the audience we were trying to engage, as far as parents, as far as youth.
And I think what was real important for us to realize, sometimes when you come from communities there's a little less resource, you try to be everything, right? You try to do all these things. And it really, we really realized, it makes more sense to run one program
Sure.
than to run 5 programs at one time. And we actually piloted 4 to 5 programs and had them running simultaneously. And I think that's really what made us realize, this is it was fun because we were just getting our feet wet in this game as far as running our organization together. But we realized, hey, we think the most impactful one could be this reading thing, and especially getting men engaged in it. And when we started doing the studies and realized, wow, there's something here.
Sure, and it's so important. I always say, in Philadelphia, where we clearly have a poverty problem, we have an education problem. Every kid every child should know how to read before they enter kindergarten.
Yes.
And if they don't, they're automatically behind. You know, people, we can put blame on why kids are failing in schools, and I don't like to put blame, but I say if they can't read going into kindergarten, they're behind automatically. And they're going to be behind in every subject, because you need to know how to read in order to read how to, you know, in order to learn. If you don't know how to read, you can't do anything. Math,
Right.
social studies, anything.
Ask you a question, Drew. When do you think reading is, do you know when reading is stopped being taught, when they don't teach reading anymore?
An actual subject in grade school?
Right.
I'm going to go back to my days. I stopped a reading course after grade school. So I did not get taught reading in high school.
You're very...
I had an English class, but...
Right.
Yes.
Third grade.
Oh, is that right? So that's atypical, my experience.
Reading stops at third grade, no matter what type of system you're in, school system, unless you have a tutor, right? So when you talk about the kids not being on level by kindergarten, right? So if they're not on level by kindergarten, they really have this very small space to get on level. And when you talk about schools that may have 30 kids in a class, may have a lot of new teachers in the class, may not have a teacher in the class. You know, I've started kindergartens with substitutes when I worked in the schools before. And this kid has this very short time to learn this skill. This is probably the most important skill that they will have to use the rest of their life. So that's when we talk about getting that message out about why this is so important, early literacy. Because one thing a lot of people don't also realize is that kid is going to be with you a lot of that 0 through 8 space. So the best teacher and the first teacher is the parent.
Sure.
The caregivers.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember with my two daughters, I have two daughters who are now freshman and sophomore. I mean, we read to them all the time. There were always books near them. I was telling my daughter before I left today, she would just sit there and look at books. And she couldn't read yet, but she would look at the pictures, which is all part of the process of learning how to read.
Yes.
Right.
And when I would read to her, I said, the Giving Tree, before she could read, I would read to her, but she would read the whole book. But she could not read yet. This is probably when she was 3. She had it memorized. So, but by memorizing the book, then that's kind of one of the steps that you do learn to read.
And the thing about that is having the books in the home.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So she was able to do that because the books were there.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. In a lot of the communities we work in, those poverty-stricken, possibly low-income communities, only 61% of those homes have no books in the home.
Right.
So.
And possibly some, and then again, we go back to education. I'm sure you run into times when maybe the father can't read, or the mother can't read, or even the father and or the mother, they're working. So, or if they're a single parent and they're working
2-3
and they're
jobs.
they're working 2 or 3 jobs, they might not have that opportunity or the time available to sit there and read. I mean, I know that I was blessed to be able to spend time with my daughters and my wife. My wife reads more than I do. I'm actually not a huge reader. I say I'm a math guy. My mind goes, it's logic, it's math, and you give me an algebra quiz, and I'll sit there and do it with my daughters. Reading's my wife's thing. But and I'm happy that my daughters have that love of reading. My daughters will just get out a book and read. So I'm like, it's great. But I know that I'm blessed that we had that opportunity when they were growing up to do so. Not everyone does.
Right.
So one of the, it's funny to even say blessings, but one of the blessings of this organization is I have dyslexia, right? I'm a struggling reader, I'm a struggling writer. And to be able to stand in front of a room full of dads, parents, grandparents, whatever type of caregiver is there, and share that with them, right? Because a lot of them are experiencing that. And through our active reading trainings, even if you are experiencing having difficulties reading, you can still be there for your child, right? You can still advocate for them. And we can also develop, one of the things we talked about yesterday, literally, is moving into that connecting literacy. That adult literacy piece, something we've been talking about for years, but right now with the work we're doing, it makes so much more sense. And to the other point that you were talking about, we literally, part of our live reading, you have to come check us out one day, Drew.
Sure. Yes.
We do, at the end, we ended with a part of our campaign is, can you please read with me? And we talk about the kids, because we give them these books to go home with, and it's like when you get home, Akeiff acts it out. Mr. A at that time, Mr. A acts like he's a little boy, and I act like I'm the dad.
Nice.
Yes.
And he talks to his father and say, "Can you please read with me?" And we go over it with the kids, and they shout it out. And 15 minutes a night, right? Everyone is real busy. Parents work 2-3 jobs, and that should not be discounted at all. However, everyone can find 15 minutes for their baby, and even if it's not with you. Hey, babysitter. Hey, mom, and you're watching, whoever tonight. Can you read to them for 15 minutes? Here go some books I got for you. So we can find 15 minutes, and if you can find 15 minutes, it can do some amazing things for your family.
Yeah. So what is a typical program? You said you go into like nursery schools, Montessori, like those type of schools.
So
Yes.
And are the parents there as well? Like, is it like you go in and the preschool or
it's a party when we go in.
Yeah. So you go in and say, hey, parents, come in and we're gonna
So
have
now
Akeiff
that
and Brent in.
we're removed from COVID. Before COVID, that was it, right? We invited all the parents in, and Akeiff and I, we go up for 30 minutes. We've authored 2 books together. I'm Beautiful and I'm Proud, and Mr. Healthy Snacks, available on Amazon. So we read those 2 books, and he connects his story of diabetes
Yes,
to
I'm a
Mr.
diabetic.
Okay.
Yep, Mr. Healthy Snacks is a gym teacher that's encouraging kids to eat healthy snacks. And I'm Beautiful and I'm Proud is a song that we sang back and forth with the kids, and I tie my story of, having some self-esteem issues when I was young and needing to have some encouragement, right? And having these little raps and songs and things I would tell myself. So we created a book called I'm Beautiful and I'm Proud to share with the kids. So we go in, we do those 2 stories. We do the ABCs with them. We do a lot of fun. We're literally singing, dancing, rolling on the floor with them. The teachers are there as well. Now, one of the things we've learned is a lot of teachers have picked up new skills on how to make reading fun. A lot of time reading is, everyone be quiet, sit down. Or through a lot of our interaction, you've learned reading is a punishment a lot of time. Go to your room and read a book. So we introduce reading as this fun, amazing, and sometimes it's not even with this, sometimes it's just storytelling, right? And we're creating these words, we're building vocabulary with our kids. So we go in for 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, depending on the flow of the interaction. And we have fun with these kids. We sang with them, we dance with them when it's over. What we used to do and what we're going back to doing now that the parents can come in is signing the parents up and saying, hey, can you do one of these one time a year, right? So if you have 20 parents there, that's 20 possible readings with a parent that would never have did this, right? And a lot of times in these communities, there's a notion that fathers aren't there. And we've gone to some very tough neighborhoods, and what we always see, and they always tell you, we have fathers here. They drop off, they pick up. Don't get me wrong, there's some issues with some fathers, just like anywhere else. But for the most part, they are supported by their fathers. And we did one at 28th and Cecil B. Moore at Kelly School one time. And a guy, he said, man, I got to go. Like, how long this going to take? I got to go somewhere. And it's like, all right, we're about to get started. And we got started. And we in there, we're having a ball. And it's a lot of parents and dads in there. And this was one of our best ones. And noticed that this guy never left. At the end, with wrapping up, with cleaning up, he's still standing there. So the guy had 15 minutes. Now, an hour after he was supposed to leave, he was still there. It just so happened at the time we started that I was working some Uber Lyft to, compensate for starting this business and walking away from a career. And I ran into the guy, picked him up from dialysis, and that's where he had to go.
Okay.
He said, I had to leave that day because I had to go to my dialysis appointment. So I'm like, oh, he wasn't just trying to leave. However, he stayed and was late for his dialysis appointment. And he said, you know what, man? I've been reading. We was driving down the boulevard. I'll never forget. He said, I've been reading with my son ever since then. And, a lot of times when we do this, we're going the next day. So you don't get to see the feedback, like what actually came of this reading. And to hear this guy say, man, and he was just talking about reading and how he loved reading. We was in the car for about 10, 12 minutes.
Nice.
And it was like, wow, I remember telling him about the story, and I've shared it a couple times, but it's like, wow, this is really happening, right? This is really taking place. This is really benefiting families, and that's what we really want to happen.
And that's very cool. You know, it's funny, and you mentioned COVID. I was talking to my daughter before I was leaving, and I was explaining, you know what you guys did, and I was more like, I normally have Republicans on the show. This is not going to be a political show at all. And she's like, oh, that's so important because of COVID. There are like so many kids miss school. I mean, COVID just messed obviously everyone's lives up. I mean, at every level. But those kids who are reading, if they did not have that parent at home to read to them, they were a year behind or 2 years behind. And I'm sure, and again, it goes back to it's hard to catch up. When they're not reading going into kindergarten, or not reading going into first grade. It's hard to catch up.
So think of that class that went in 2020 that was in first grade, and then second grade, they missed those 2 years of school. Now entering third grade, that little space that they had to, get all this reading, there's no way possible you could get that during COVID. The one-on-one times you could get, the pull-outs you could get, just the teacher knowing, right? The teacher being physically aware and having more insight with a kid because she's there with them physically. Oh, this kid is struggling with reading. That didn't happen, and that is a large amount of kids. So in 2020, the third grade reading scores in Philadelphia was 67% of kids were reading below level. Those 67% kids, right, they will never get any help unless someone is going to pay for it, So technically, they'll become adults and still be 67% of our population who can't read above a third grade reading level.
And it is, because you can't, it goes back, you can't catch up. And it's not, I never like to play the blame game. It's not the teacher's fault, because these teachers have 20, 30 kids in a class, and it's hard to pinpoint and say, okay, these students, you're not reading on level, but we're still moving on. So it's like they're left behind, and they can never get back.
So I'll give you some homework, Drew, and your audience that's watching. Because there's a thought that you can't catch up. And that's not true. You have to know how to advocate for your child to catch up. You have to know where to access that information. Had a lady in Radnor tell me, this mom group who's advocating for dyslexia. She said everyone likes to brag about Radnor being the #1 school district, but they don't tell you we spend over $1 million yearly on reading tutors. So when you talk about the struggles of reading, they impact everyone. But if you have the access and the knowledge to how to get help, myself, during COVID, I had to sue my son's school. He was third grade. He just was on a first grade reading level. And now we're in the middle of COVID. Now we're struggling. I know all that I know, and I also know how to advocate too. So I became a bulldog. We got a lawyer. And now my son is in 5th grade. He's one of the top readers in his class. So the homework is the science of reading, right? If you know about OG, if you know about Wilson's reading, kids can learn how to read if they have any type of reading difference. But how many people know about this, right? And that's one of the things Father's Read is heavily in now, is the awareness around the science of reading and how we can help our babies, right? And it's in this daycare network that we haven't discussed yet. We're building a 100-center daycare network, the Ready First Center right here in the Philadelphia region. And one of the things we're going to inundate them with, as far as a resource, is the science of reading. If these kids can learn to read from infancy or pre-K3, pre-K4, they hit kindergarten, they're on level, and they will never lose that ability. Now we're talking about kids in some of the poorest neighborhoods, right? But not just the poorest neighborhoods. When we get this message out there, anyone can use it, right? Everyone has. But how often do we hear people talk about the science of reading? And there's no crazy call to anything, people. Sure. Google it, find out, and especially if your child is struggling with reading, I've lived it. It works. We've seen it work. We know it works. It's plenty of studies out there.
And again, it goes back, you have to learn to read so you could read to learn.
read to
And
learn,
so it's
yeah.
not just reading, it goes across all subjects. So tell me more about, so you're opening daycares, did I hear that correctly?
I wish the way they.
Okay. So it's a network, it's a network of.
It's
Yes.
a network. We have crazy ideas. We're creators, and we say, you know what? It actually started out with 300. Let's get 300 centers. Nah, let's get 100 centers, right? Let's create this network, and what we're going to do is we started out. We're right around 82 now. We give them hundreds to thousands of books. The books are for the kids to take home,
Okay.
also to stock in the library. So we're trying to build home libraries, right? A statistic a lot of people don't realize, in poor communities, on average, there's 300 kids sharing one book. Whereas in the suburbs, there's 13 books per a child. So so that's why it's important for us to get these books to the daycares, but not just the books. Now we're bringing in resources, right? We're doing online training. If you go to our YouTube channel, Fathers Read 365 TV, you can check out our first animated online training for parents. It's an active reading training. And we're figuring like, hey, how do we catch these parents, right? We could catch them at the daycare. So we're 100 daycares. When I say the region, we have some in Pensacola, Camden. We're going to go out to Chester, Norristown. We have a meeting in Norristown on Friday. But in Philadelphia, the areas that really need this, we're all in those centers, right? We have like 6 centers on 52nd Street. So these are our centers. They're going to get literacy resources. They're going to get in-person readings. And we're also going looking for politicians, right? This is a political show to that extent, to looking to adopt some of these centers. We're looking at corporations to adopt some of these centers. We're working with Vanguard right now. They're an amazing assistant. The William Penn Foundation right now, really helping us go out and I say load these places down with resources and that knowledge and that access. So these parents will know, hey, is your kid struggling, right? They can get access to this tutoring. They can get access to this language program.
And the private-public partnerships are so important.
Yes.
I tell people, the government is not very good at doing anything. I want to be a politician, but I will say the government's not very good at it. So, I look at companies like Comcast, and it's like, oh, these huge corporations. I'm like, these huge corporations do a lot of good if you look into it. So, I would hope Comcast is one of those organizations helping you guys, and if not, definitely call them up because they have a lot of money.
We actually just had a politician say, write a letter for Comcast to do something with us, and they'll support that. And that's one of the things we've learned. We sat at a meeting last week in Northwest Philadelphia, and there was about 50 nonviolent programs just in Germantown, West Oak Lane, Mount Airy section. And the frustration in talking to the politician was funding, right? And a lot of people don't know about there's so many other routes to funding besides just knocking on a politician's doors. Politicians are great. What we've learned a lot of time for connections to those Comcast or those even private donors. But it was so much frustration in there because everyone just wanted, city council, senator, whoever were in that building, just give us money. And it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that.
Well, because if you do, the only way to get more money is to raise taxes. I tell people that all the time. It's like, so you want programs, you want this, and it's great. And a lot of programs we do need to fund more, but it's like, are you ready to, Akeiff, do you want to pay more taxes? Nope. That's right. Most people are like, no, I don't want to pay more taxes.
Right.
I'm like, well, then we got to find those unique ways. We got to think out of the box. We got to look at those private-public partnerships.
Yes.
And we look at something like in Philadelphia. I am a believer and a fan of universal pre-K. I'm a fan of everything that the rebuild program, everything the sugar tax brings, I'm a fan of. Universal pre-K. I'm a parks guy, so I like the rebuild program.
Gotcha.
I want libraries to be open more, but I do not like the soda tax. I think. And I was actually, and I will say when it first came out, not to get too political, because of course as a Republican, I'm not gonna like any new taxes, but I remember when it was coming out, I thought it was gonna be a couple pennies on a soda. And that just isn't true. It's 50% more in a soda. And you know what I learned in 2019 when I was running for council? And I went around and it was interesting the communities that were opposed to it and the communities that were for it. I live in Center City.
Okay.
My community was like, oh, it's great. We got to do this. It's great. But then when I was in underserved communities, they were like, no, we hate it. Like, we're paying so much more for this product. And you begin to think about it. It's like, okay, so people at Center City might have a little more mobility. They might, I grew up on the main line. I grew up in Villanova. So, I'm out and seeing my family a lot in the main line, and I don't do it, but if I want to, while I'm driving out there, I can pick up some soda and, or sweet beverage and bring it back. People in underserved community that are landlocked in North Philadelphia,
sometimes that corner store is the grocery store.
Yeah,
and the
exactly,
other thing, what they really don't correlate is me paying more for this soda and the resources to come back from this. And it may even be universal pre-K, but to the person who's not, I don't have a kid, and that whole thing.
Yeah.
And even with the pre-K, it's like, how much do I even see it visibly there? Right, I may see the sign, I may see the kids going there, but how much do I this pre-K looks the same as it did when I went there and it wasn't universal pre-K. So sometimes it's really hard to connect that when it's like, all right, I would pay more for the soda if I saw the result of paying more for the soda.
Yeah. And
I was going to say, we visited the mayor's office of education back in 2018, 2019, right when we were getting started. And this is when that whole soda tax deal was coming. And we were like, oh, wow, it's maybe hundreds of millions of dollars being poured into.
To start this. It was all around that time.
Being poured into the pre-K system. And, we were sitting down, we were telling them, the programs that we had, how we can assist these communities. And we were like, hey, put us in front of these pre-Ks. Just figuring there was a way that we could possibly take on funding for our organization. And that's one of the downfalls of, organizations like ourselves who can be really impactful when it comes to helping your local politician when the focus is crime and education. So, we thought we were going in doing a great thing, and all they did was just place us, they placed us in front of the providers, but there was no type of assistance as far as, being able to fund what it is that we have going on.
And I think the struggle is vetting these programs. Like I said, there was 50 programs in just the Northwest, right? So some of them are really shoestring put together, and some of them some well-ran organizations. And you might be are you here? How long you gonna be around? How long? So it's that back and forth too, and trying to figure out who do we partner with. But I will say that more times than not, it seems like it doesn't happen at all. And I do believe that a lot of these mom and pops, or what they call grassroots organizations, are the key to helping a lot of what we're seeing in the community. A lot of the issues. A lot where we built our reputation is we went to H in Ontario. We went to Kensington and Allegheny. So we would get people who, when we started giving out books, they like, where y'all going?
Yeah.
Come get these books. Can y'all take? And they would give us books, and we didn't know how to get books. So it really looked good for us because we were out there giving out books in these neighborhoods where they were needed. But my point was we were willing to go where the need was. A lot of people, let's just say a lot of people don't, right?
Going to K&A can be a little scary.
It can be a whole hell of a lot of scary. Let's be honest. It can be for anybody. Like I ain't like I got to pass down there.
Well, there was one situation he was in about a couple months ago where he was delivering books, and there was a standoff between two individuals, and then
and it was
the
under
gun
the
went
L
off.
too. It wasn't K&A. It was further up in Frankfurt, but yeah, literally right outside of a daycare center. So it is rough, right? But however, the thought is this is where it's most needed.
Sure.
And if we're not willing to go there, because there's a lot of pretty organizations in the city, right? And they can get propped up because they know the right people. Whereas we really we had someone tell us one day, this organization y'all got is really good for the Black and brown community. But don't ever expect someone like William Penn to fund something like this. I wouldn't get my hopes up. And we kind of we actually chuckle, like she don't realize who she talking to. But I think she was trying to protect us, honestly. I think she was trying to say, hey, guys, this is not going to get funded. We've seen this before. 2 weeks later, someone reached out to us saying, hey, William Penn is trying to give you guys some money. They heard about you guys, and we ended up, and William Penn to this day is our biggest funder.
Nice.
And we've been with William Penn since a year after
Since
we started.
2018 was our initial meeting with
Nice.
them. Sat down with them.
So,
yeah.
but that's kind of the stuff that you kind of face. And a lot of times these programs who can do a lot of good in these communities where everyone's trying to figure out, and we're putting the same monies behind the same programs that haven't been working. But Miss Sally down the street, who got the pulse of the neighborhood, who's really running a program with no money. She has an organization, she has volunteers, but no one gives Miss Sally any money. She does it from her heart. And after a while, Miss Sally just may stop doing it. She may move, anything may happen. But the point is, there's a missing connection between these grassroots groups who are professional, who can do the job, but who don't get
But
nearly
can't get that
enough.
funding. And it's tough because they got to almost prove themselves
Right.
to be a good organization.
Yes.
And
that's good. That's important.
because there's
though.
got to be there's got to be accountability. If you get the money, you got to have the accountability. Well, look at this. I don't know if that's a sign that maybe we should wrap up. We do need to wrap up. I was actually just looking. We're pretty much right at the time. So, but before we go, obviously you do need money to be supported. You
Yes.
are a 501c3, correct?
Yes. We are under a fiscal sponsorship with Urban Affairs Coalition.
Okay, so they act as your fiscal sponsor
Yes.
as a 501c3.
Yes.
So if I wanted to give you money, and for people who don't know why it's important to be a 501c3, if someone gives you money through that fiscal sponsor,
Yes.
which I'm sure is how your donations are set up,
Yes.
they can write that off on their taxes.
Yes,
so,
they can.
So before we go, why
So
don't
you
you
can
say
help
your
yourself by helping us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's the website that people can go to in order to donate?
FathersRead365.org.
Okay. And do you guys have a YouTube channel? You said you do something on YouTube
Yes,
sometimes?
we have a YouTube channel, Fathers Read 365 TV on YouTube. What's cool is the first series of Dream Teamsters is about to premiere. We took 4 local artists plus art books, and we
Authors.
excuse me.
Okay.
4 local authors, and we recreated their books with animation and actors from the local acting school, I Can Act. So there's voiceover by the actors, and there's animation done by our girl Amber, who's actually our second employee, part-time employee. But Amber is an amazing person. She directed our documentary. But we have that coming out, Dream Teamsters, that we're building for our networks and for everyone to check out. So that's going to be cool coming out. We have a training on there, active reading training, which is 3 minutes. Please, all parents and caregivers, check that out. That's very important.
All right, that all sounds good, and I promise you we'll push out some of this information
Thank you.
Great.
through our social media channels, my personal ones, Ursula, and this time in January you will have another advocate on City Council because you'll
good luck,
have me
Drew.
on
Good
City
luck,
Council.
Drew.
So thank you.
Hey, we're a politician's dream dream organization for the things that we tackle when it
That's
comes
right.
to crime and education.
And you know my campaign manager Randy Robinson. So
Yes.
yeah, Randy
Yes.
Randy
We
had
know
done some
Randy
work for
very
you
well.
guys. Yes. Yes,
Doing
yeah,
this
exactly.
actually at on a podcast.
What's
Very
up,
cool.
Randy?
So-
What's up?
Yeah, Randy's my man. He's been with me since the beginning. So
Yes.
all right. Well,
Great.
thank you again for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. You're watching Ursula Media and the Republican Zone. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.
Yeah.
The Republican Zone is brought to you by Drew Murray,